Ahead in the Bahamas tonight, the Prime Minister defending his reputation in Parliament today.
Also ahead tonight, the police force seizing more than 100 guns.
And 3 men charged with the murder of a female student last week. The Bahamas Tonight, the National Report, starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Everyday.
The nation's chief defending his character today as allegations surface about a personal relationship with a Lightfoot Key millionaire who reportedly sought favors from government. Good Monday evening, Bahamas. I'm Altaviz Munnings.
I'm Kish Latterly. Thanks so much for joining us. Topping the news tonight, the Prime Minister's comments came in the halls of Parliament as he denied any wrongdoing. He said he welcomes an investigation and getting to the truth. Here's Janaea Noel Ferguson.
But under no circumstances, Mr. Speaker, will you ever find that I would have done favor for consideration.
Prime Minister Perry Christie fervently denying any impropriety on his behalf with regards to his dealings with Peter Nygaard or Louis Bacon. He says he also has no reason to believe that any of his cabinet colleagues committed any such impropriety as well. The Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister's relationship with Nygaard also called into question after videos went viral suggest that Nygaard was awaiting approvals to build on government land. He was reportedly growing impatient after he financed the PLP's campaign in exchange for favors. It's an allegation that the Prime Minister has denied.
So now the question is, there are some ministers who could persuade the Prime Minister to do something the Prime Minister feels he shouldn't do. Well, when is that going to happen? When is that going to happen? That the Prime Minister will do something he shouldn't do because some ministers come to him.
The minister should be fired, Mr. Prime Minister.
Ministers didn't. They didn't come, Mr. Speaker. Ministers did not come to me. It is a lie. It is a lie. It is a lie.
Now, Prime Minister Perry Christie also called on members opposite to cooperate with the investigation as they too may be named.
I expect the courts in the Bahamas to fully ventilate this whole affair. The final point, sir, is this. This matter may involve criminal activity, and it may involve criminal activity sourcing from that side.
FNM leader Dr. Hubert Minnis hitting back, calling for a transparent investigation and anti-corruption legislation.
The Prime Minister should also explain to the Bahamian people what official steps are being taken by all law enforcement agencies to fully and properly investigate the very serious allegations.
Now, the PM replied, there is nothing to hide.
My major concern in this whole matter, Mr. Speaker, is that that there are people who are involved in this designed the outcome. And they knew the outcome would be opposition figures getting up and asking questions and raising questions about whether this nation is for sale, whether or not the Prime Minister acted improperly because his party received a major political donation. Mr. Speaker, insofar as those allegations are concerned, I have strongly rejected them. And I've also indicated that the files will be available to the investigators, and as the files will be available to the Supreme Court of the Bahamas. There is nothing secret about this.
Prime Minister Perry Christie says he's anxious to see this matter proceed through the courts, and all documents from the government will be turned over to move that process along as soon as possible. Janaea Noel Ferguson, ZNS Network News.
Well, as you heard the Prime Minister indicate, the matter is in the hands of the police, and today the Police Commissioner Alison Greenslade confirmed that police launched an investigation Friday into allegations of a murder-for-hire plot brought to light in a Tribune article last week involving fashion mogul Peter Nygaard and members of the Save the Bays organization. Commissioner Greenslade says some police questioned the nation's leader this morning and had plans to speak with everyone who was listed in the article, including Nygaard. He says the murder-for-hire allegations were troubling and the investigation is underway to determine if there is any truth to the claims.
I decided, based upon the fact that names were called in the newspapers and in other places, to have the detectives go and see the Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Perry Christie, to see the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Ms. Brave Davis, certainly to see Mr. Code Smith, Reverend Dr. C.B. Moss, and any number of other names of people whose names are called in open source documents, to go and see them to seek to determine if there is anything of a criminal nature that we as a police department should be pursuing. I wish to also indicate that the Right Honourable Prime Minister has spoken directly to our lead detective to indicate his level of discontent.
Now, Commissioner Greenslade further invited members of the public who have any concerns about the matter to talk to police about the alleged murder-for-hire plot. He also called into question how the investigator supposedly hired by the Save the Bays organization was allowed to work in the country without possession of a work permit, something he says he intends to confirm with immigration officials. The Commissioner of Police suggested that nobody is above the law and says police will conduct a thorough investigation into this matter.
Never have I had a conversation with the Right Honourable Prime Minister where he's asked me to do something illegal or to cut corners. It has never happened. I meet with the Honourable Minister of National Security often. I see him each Wednesday, and I could see him as often as he wishes or I wish. He always has an open door for me. At no time has he asked me to do anything illegal or contrary to law. And if he asks me, I will not do it if it's contrary to law or illegal. Then make sure you get that on record. If it's not consistent with the law, I am not going to do it.
Well, the feud has created a political firestorm. Today, Progressive Liberal Party Chairman Bradley Roberts defended members of his party, charging instead that it's the Free National Movement which can shed some light on the investigation. Mr. Roberts called FNM Chairman Michael Pintard to resign, alleging that there are questions that he can answer regarding the investigation. In an earlier statement, FNM leader Dr. Hubert Minnis called on the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister to specifically confirm or deny the allegations made by Nygaard and to completely repudiate any suggested gang affiliations, association, or interaction. This is how Mr. Roberts responded to Dr. Minnis' statement.
Indeed, Dr. Minnis' statement is a carbon copy of the language and position placed in the public domain by the organization called and known as Save the Bays. Simply put, the claims, hints, allegations against the government of the Bahamas in this sustained and very much personal conflict between Mr. Louis Bacon, whose funds and heads to Save the Bays, and Mr. Peter Nygaard are patently false. The PLP distanced itself from the raging conflicts between Mr. Bacon and Mr. Nygaard, two guests in the Bahamas.
Debate began in the House of Assembly this morning on the mid-year budget. Minister of State for Financial Services Michael Halkitis says the new value-added tax regime continues to be monitored by the government as it assesses its impact.
As we continue to assess its impact, particularly on the most needy, our ability to come back and make any adjustments that we need to make in whichever way we do it, either through direct assistance or any amendment to the legislation. And that is something we have committed to do. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that when we introduced the VAT, we also made a commitment to increase the government's efforts in the area of consumer protection. And in the last budget, we put a penny on every gallon of fuel imported, Mr. Speaker, to go to fund those efforts. And I'm very happy to say that the public will be very, very soon be able to see ramped up efforts in the area of consumer protection.
Well, as the government has been criticized for imposing VAT on basic necessities, Mr. Halkitis explained the government's rationale.
The reality is that exempting food items, for instance, from VAT is a second best or inferior measure to reduce the potential negative impact of VAT on lower income households. While a low income family will typically spend a higher proportion of its income on food, a high income family will typically spend much more in absolute terms on food, much more money. So exempting food from VAT would provide a much higher dollar benefit to the high income family than to a low income family.
The government solidifying its partnership with the University of Miami by signing 2 memoranda of understanding today, one with the University of Miami's Miller School of Medicine and the other with its Interdisciplinary Stem Cell Institute. This follows the Christie administration's initial meeting with UM officials last year on stem cell research and its impact on the Bahamas. The agreements will allow more educational training. Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Perry Christie, is very pleased that these agreements have been signed on the advent of national health insurance as the Bahamas becomes the first country in the English-speaking Caribbean to implement this type of initiative on stem cell research.
Saw that it was being advanced without legislative support. We saw that it was being advanced without putting in place the facilities of government to ensure that we were able to monitor all of the interventions that were to be made, to be able to measure those interventions in the context of scientific legitimacy, and therefore to be able to account to the Bahamian people that we were not risking moving to a new regime and medical interventions without having the backup. With the business success of the stem cell projects at Okeanos and Freeport, it's Okeanos Heart Institute, it is envisaged that the pillars of the stem cell therapy and biotechnology industries will be further strengthened.
UM's Health Systems Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Pascal Goldschmidt, and Founding Director of the Interdisciplinary Stem Cell Institute, Dr. Joseph Hare, look forward to advancing stem cell research in the Bahamas as UM is in the top tier of stem cell research in the United States.
We want to help you recreate that knowledge for the students in a way that in the fullness of time, we very much hope that we will be able to work with you and develop a extension of the Miller School of Medicine in the Bahamas in partnership with the University of the Bahamas.
Responsibly by passing legislation, by allowing standards to be passed and forming a committee that can review and monitor all of the things that are happening.
In economic news this Monday, the government is committed to ensuring creativity and diversity in product offerings through the financial services sector.
Now, the Prime Minister didn't mince words when he expressed concern that the sector, which has paved the way and established the model for other nations, may not be keeping pace with global changes.
Well, Prime Minister Christie expressed concern that the financial services sector appeared to be lagging behind and called for immediate intervention to safeguard this vital industry. Clint Watson explains.
This sector is too critical, too precariously poised to have it fractured by politics.
Prime Minister the Right Honorable Perry Christie says he has asked the Economic Development and Planning Unit of his office to propose solutions on how we make the Bahamas more competitive generally. Mr. Christie says sovereignty is one thing, but we must have the skill set to make the most of it.
We will therefore have a competitiveness council that will focus on ensuring the execution of government priorities and a delivery-focused approach to government services. Our approach will facilitate the identification of breakdowns in the system and ensure that speedy resolution of challenges so that we can get on with the business of making the Bahamas more resilient, more business-friendly, and a location of choice to live, work, and operate a business in.
Prime Minister Christie says he remains dismayed at the Bahamas' continuous slip each year in the Doing Business rankings put out by the World Bank. The Bahamas comes in at 106th ranking, below our regional counterparts and behind some of the most disadvantaged countries in the world.
This is unacceptable. It can be improved, and it has to be and will be improved. But the ranking suggests that if we are to remain a serious contender in financial services, then we must provide better, more efficient government services. We need to dramatically reduce red tape while facilitating an efficient, stress-free, corruption-free environment for business development. We cannot be part of a race to the bottom. Instead, our goal must be to attain a ranking comparable to, nay, superior to, our international rivals.
In his quest to see a turnaround, the Prime Minister says both public and private sectors need to move in tandem towards these goals.
We must endeavor to root out the inefficiencies, the bottlenecks, and communication failures. We must develop a zero tolerance for substandard performance. In sum, we must strive to become best in class as a government services provider. We need to set a standard not only for the bureaucracy, but for the country as a whole. This is hard work, though. It will cause some pain, but it is not a goal that we can achieve without commitment and perseverance.
Mr. Christie says the Bahamas must be innovative and proactive in developing and delivering products and services that respond to the needs of our clients.
But let's be clear. The Bahamian financial services sector of the future must be more diverse with improved product offerings. We must seek out new markets, new clients, and offer dynamic services. Let us examine the centers of new global wealth and high growth and prioritize the selection and implementation of products that these markets require.
And so the key will be partnership. Prime Minister Christie says his government is keen on focusing with the financial services sector to ensure the Bahamas has a prominent place internationally in financial services. In Marsh Harbor, Abaco, Clint Watson, ZNS Network News.